for joining us today for our town hall meeting. We are in the midst of getting ready to propose some changes to the bylaws and to the membership fees in our business meeting coming up in June for our conference. And we wanted to have an informational meeting for you guys. We are recording this for anyone who couldn't jump on today so that people could maybe find out what we're proposing. So one, it won't take quite so long in the business meeting to explain everything. Hopefully everyone will be informed. But also, we just want to get some feedback from you guys before we actually make the proposals to the membership. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have two topics today that we're going to cover. We're going to cover bylaw changes, and we're going to also talk about changes to the membership fees. So we'll start out with bylaws. We figured membership fees might stir up a little bit more conversation. So we thought we would knock out the bylaws first. We realized that we really needed to work on changing the bylaws. They were antiquated. They were pretty old, and we had some statements in there that just really needed to be updated. They were last changed in 2017, but those were very minor changes. And so really the last substantial change was 2003. So we're about 20 years out. But we also needed to separate the bylaws from the policy manual because it was a bit confusing. The executive committee can change things to the policy manual, but they can't change things to the bylaws without a vote from the membership. And that was starting to get a little confused. So we're separating them. The process that we went through to kind of come up with the bylaws that we have, that we're proposing today. One, we really lucked up with Deb Feltz. Deb has had a lot of experience working with bylaws and was working with another organization when she came on. So she volunteered, and I will say that she did the vast majority of the work on this. She made edits and recommended changes. From there, we went to the NASPSPA lawyer that we have been using for quite some time, but since we were established in Illinois, we needed to make sure that they really fit Illinois law. And so we asked the NASPSPA lawyer to review it. He looked at our recommended changes, but then he also suggested more changes based on legal aspects coming from the state. We took it back to the executive committee. They looked over the recommended changes and have approved it. And now we're at this town hall meeting informing you of what we're planning to do. And then hopefully at the NASPSPA conference at our business meeting on June 11th, we will vote on the approval of our new bylaws. So with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the bylaws. Deb is going to review substantial changes, and then we're just going to open it up for you guys for questions. Can everybody see that? I think that works. All right, so Deb, if you want to just kind of walk through what changes we made, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Sure, thanks. And just to know, I just got a signal that my internet connection is unstable. Still and yet, and I don't live in the middle of Montana, but it still can be that way, and things freeze up. So hopefully we can get through this, and I don't get kicked off and have to get kicked back on. So what I'll do is go run through this, and if you have some questions, please make a note so that we can address all of those at the end of this. But basically, as Mary had said, we consulted, and I consulted other organization I was involved with, also had a lawyer, so in a different state, and then consulted a number of other organizations that are professional organizations like Pediatric Exercise Science, the National Academy of Kinesiology, the National Association of Sports Sociology, AKA, In-Group, which is a interdisciplinary research on groups, psychology kind of organization. And they all have some things that are somewhat different. Some of them have elections to boards, and then boards elect officers. But basically for a lot of this stuff, the main thing is removing the policies from the Constitution and bylaws, so that changes can be made separately in the policy document, and then some wording that was in the bylaws that really was policy oriented, and could be changed more easily if they weren't in the bylaws. So that's a separate document now. The most organizations have dropped the word Constitution from the bylaws. It just makes it simpler and more straightforward, unless there's some requirement by state law, which there isn't. And then the other big thing was changing executive committee to board of directors. That's as per Illinois law, and I checked with some of these other organizations, and that seems to be similar for them as well. Some with large boards do have an executive committee within the board, but the big thing now is you'll see, and we have to get kind of used to this too, we're call ourselves a board, not an executive committee. So as I go through this in Article 2, we cleaned this up to make sure that we had registered agent and registered office, but because we don't exist just in the state of Illinois, we also have a principal office for the corporation, which is the president's office. And this was per legal advice. Other things that we've done, such as in Article 3 and 3.2 and 3.3, it's to make things more explicit, so that people are clear about what's involved with their membership. And then others like dues, in terms of where the billing and collection is done, just allows more flexibility in that, in terms of where when dues are payable. The one big thing, and I'll come back to this after I go all the way through, is in directors and officers. This had been, oh, thank you for catching any kind of typos. that will be helpful. Instead of executive committee, these are directors and officers. Again, just the terminology that is being used. And big thing here is at no time, and this I've seen in some of the other bylaws, shall there be fewer than 3 members. This is because should the plane crash happen, some big kind of devastating thing, you can still operate, and that is what the minimum is in most states for being able to still legally operate, is to have at least 3 members. So that's why that's in there. Other things are moved to policy because it really was about policy. It wasn't about bylaws. And if you wanted to change when something went into like a fall newsletter and transitioning from outgoing to incoming treasurer, you could do that through policy. Mostly bylaws now are supposed to be just as lean as they really can be legally for the legal operation. And then, yeah, as I said, duties that are not essential to bylaws have been moved to the policy manual. Under Article 6, if we can move to that, jump to that now, and I'm going to come back to Article 5. A business meeting of the society, it must be held annually. And before, I think that it said that has to be held during the conference. a lot of what has happened with this pandemic has opened our eyes to the kinds of things that might not be possible. And by saying that we must have a business meeting held annually doesn't mean that it absolutely has to be during the conference. And then the last major thing that I'll mention is under Article 10. This is where it's made explicit that policies, which are separate from the bylaws, may be adopted in terms of the conduction of affairs if they're consistent with the bylaws, and that they can be changed by a vote of the board. That's just for the policies. Now let me go back to the Article 5. And I don't know, Mary, if did you have a slide? We had one person ahead of time make a comment about Article 5.
Yeah, I have those questions.
Okay, did you want to put those up?
Sure. There are the questions, Deb.
Okay, so one question came up, and this was from someone who is involved in another international organization that I think it's more international than ours. That is members from a number of countries, somewhat equally distributed, I think. And he mentioned that since the bylaws only requires the Secretary Treasurer to be a U.S. citizen, it's possible that NASPA gets into a situation in which no other board member can co-sign, making it impossible to co-sign. And so if we think through, okay, what is the situation? What could happen here? And let's say that Laura, our current Secretary Treasurer, is the only U.S. Citizen or resident with a Social Security number. And President-elect, the past president, the communications director, and the student member are all Canadians. Not sure that would ever happen. Did you have a question, Penny? No, okay. We have to first see, okay, what is that situation? You know, is this something that has to be signed like right now? Can Laura do it tomorrow? So first kind of what is that situation? Secondly, there is a provision where if a member resigns or is not being able to function, the president can appoint a person to take that place, to take that position for the rest of the term. So if we got into that kind of a situation, that's something that could happen. So I don't see this as being something that we have to change the bylaws for. And the recommendation about having like maybe 10-year terms or minimum requirement that 3 board members have to hold U.S. citizenship or permanent status to be a director, which means to be a member of the what's now called the board instead of executive committee, is not something that that we need to put in that kind of provision, which I think would make it very difficult, given the size of our board, for members who are not U.S. citizens to participate in that level of leadership. So that's what our recommendation is regarding that. And Illinois does not require the same things, I guess, as what Nevada is requiring, because the lawyer saw no problem with this. So with that,
we're back to just questions.
Yes.
Anybody?
We do have one question in the chat from Jeff Laban on that topic, asking, could the past treasurer just serve as an emergency co-signer? If you want to respond to that,
Yeah.
Deb, or
I think with that kind of appointment from the president, because it doesn't say that the president has to appoint somebody from the board. It has to just appoint a member. So yes, I think that those are possibilities.
and then Jenny Etner has two questions, and then after that we'll go to Jeff Fairbrother.
Yeah, I had a question about 3.3, which is a paragraph that makes me really uncomfortable because it doesn't seem that we have any definition of what prejudicial to the welfare or best interest of NASPA means. And in this era of social justice, it just makes me really uncomfortable because it sounds, I don't know, what does that mean? You know, and who gets to decide that? You know, I get it that it's the executive committee, but that sort of seems like a small, relatively small group to make a decision like this. And I just didn't know if we need this, or if we need it, if there's a way that we can further clarify what we mean by prejudicial to the welfare or best interest of NASPA.
Yeah, that's a good question. And other board members can chime in after I try to answer this. This is something that I've seen with other organizations, and as a protection mechanism for when there are occasions, and this is very rare, that someone or some member blasts the organization in either in the media or does something that is really egregious and maybe law breaking at a conference, and those kinds of things really should be dealt with, but there's been no mechanism to do it. It does say that the member may request a hearing within 10 days notice of expulsion or suspension, and the board then shall convene a hearing. So it doesn't mean that there is any recourse that member should have, but that does allow for a hearing. And let's see, Penny has a comment in the chat.
I think that was for a question further down. So
I think, you know, the examples you gave, Deb, makes sense, but the way it's written is really open-ended. I mean, and it may suggest to some people that behaviors that don't rise to the level that you just said could somehow be viewed as prejudicial. You know, what if I go to a protest wearing something that identifies me as a NASPA member and I'm caught on television? Is that prejudicial to the welfare or best interest of NASPA? I don't know. You know, that's not the same level as what you said, but it does just worry me a little bit relative to sort of censoring of behaviors of people when they're not at the conference and not on social media. So I don't know if there's a way for the board to provide either examples or clarification as to what that means, And then the other thing that I don't think is clear in there is it just for a year? Can I rejoin next year, or is it a permanent lifetime ban? You know, what are the repercussions? The way it's so open-ended just makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And if you have some suggested language, Jenny, that would be helpful to us as well. And
Deb,
yeah.
This is Jackie Goodway. I just want to jump in. I think the other piece, I agree with Jenny. I think the other piece we need to add in there that's not really clear is that member should receive a notice from the organization that identifies what the behavior is and then warns them of expulsion, and then there's the hearing. But nowhere in there does it just says you're going to be expelled, and there's no kind of process piece in there really, or the front end of the process piece.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was going to say that too on this topic, that having some transparent documentation about what due process is would be really important, I think, to protect the organization.
Okay.
Because I do agree, and there are lots of different levels of things. I agree. I think this is a good point, Jenny. I mean, we could have someone who's plagiarized, or we have someone who's stolen data. That's a different level than someone who's sexual harassment or rape at a conference, right? So there's different levels, and those things have, I don't know about the rape piece, but we have had sexual harassment occur. And those have been complaints that have been filed. So I do think we do need to probably address that a little bit better. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Jenny, does that answer both your questions?
Yeah, well, I had one more question, just while you guys have got me. So the very last paragraph, 10.6, about dissolution, it doesn't say anything in there about who's going to decide. You know, are we going to have a fight where we're saying, okay, I want it to go to NASH, and I want it to go to NAK, and I want it to go to, you know, or should this be something where the membership at that time takes a vote and it's proportionately distributed to the organizations that receive a certain share of the vote? I mean, I don't know, but it just seemed to me, again, to be a little too open-ended. Hopefully, I know you guys have got things going well, so hopefully this is never going to happen. But in the event that it did, it seems like we should have a little more clarity about how that similar nonprofit organization or organizations, how they would be chosen.
Yeah, okay. I thought that, and I just now see that executive committee is in here rather than board. I thought the spell check guy got all of that.
The it actually says executive committee. That's why, Deb.
Yeah.
Executive's misspelled, so you couldn't find it.
Ah, that's why. Yep. Okay. Yeah. That as the board shall resolve.
But would you want input from the membership? You know, I mean, it seems like typically the executive committee seeks input from the membership, so it just seems like maybe that could be incorporated here.
Okay, so is it input from the membership, or is it decided by the membership?
Yeah, I don't know.
So I would say, I would add that the way that's worded right now, that at that point there is no membership.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating either way. I'm just saying the way it's worded, there is no membership. You're distributing assets of a dissolved organization.
Yeah, and that's probably why it was worded that way, as per legal advice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe that's the way it should be, but I don't know. It still seems, you know, the executive committee is a pretty small group with limited representation across the numerous organizations that NASPA members are also engaged with. And so, you know, maybe it would be, to your point, Jeff, maybe it would be, you know, upon seeking input from the former membership. I don't know, the most recent membership. But thank you all for
I
your
guess
hard work on
technically
this.
would be the former board at that point too, right?
Yeah, the former board from the former membership. Thanks everybody for your work on this.
Yeah, and some of these we'll need to also go back to the lawyer on to make sure, you know, that we can say what we're saying.
Exactly. Any other questions for Deb, or any of us for that matter, on bylaws?
So,
So it sounds like-
I'll keep going down. Some people will put some questions or had
Yeah,
sort of
so
off their
can I
head, so
ask my question?
further. Yeah, you're up.
Yeah, so this is just a question about process, and please don't interpret this as challenging in any way, shape, or form. It's just, I'm doing the same thing for AKA, and so I'm really curious what criteria you use to determine what's a bylaw and what's policy. Were you able to find like a objective criteria that provided you guidance with what level you should go down to discriminate between what should be a policy and what should be a bylaw?
Yeah, well, one, that is this legally required in order to operate? And if it's not, then it goes into policy, and some of it becomes obvious as you read through it. The president will send out thank you notes to those who volunteered for something, or will pay for the lunch, or will no. That's policy, and it's operational. It's operational. I think that's how we decided.
Hey, Jeff, Deb is a really good person to tap into if you need to.
Yeah, I know she doesn't know it. She doesn't know it yet, but she's lining herself up for future work.
She really does. She did a great job helping us with this. Any other questions?
David Anderson had put one in the chat. David, do you want to express that verbally?
Yeah, happy to do that, because I had a couple of other little things too. So just quickly, that right at the beginning, the 2.2 on the, I'm just scrolling up my document, on the address of the corporation.
Yeah.
Again, it says it should be either the president's address or the president-elect's address, but again, that person could not be a US citizen, and so perhaps it makes more sense to have the Secretary Treasurer's address as the address, because that is the only board member required to be a US citizen.
Yeah, I'll check that out with the lawyer, but I also just caught that as I was reading kind of last minute. So good eyesight there, David. And it does say that the corporation may have other such offices, or such other offices, kind of locations. But I think making it clear, since we do have that requirement anyway for the Secretary Treasurer, that I'll check to see if that's possible. But yeah, that would make more sense.
Okay, and then to the little things in 5.5, which describes the Secretary Treasurer's role. And this is just a typo. The penultimate sentence that starts, other duties may be prescribed. There's something missing in that sentence.
Yeah, something that's other duties may be prescribed by the board or by the president, and in general, yeah, the Secretary Treasurer performs all duties incident to the office of Secretary Treasurer. That could be worded better.
Yeah, it just needs rewording. And then finally, because this is salient to me. 5.7 under the past president, do we want to add in there that the past president is also responsible for making sure the abstracts get published? Because right now it basically just specifies that past president oversees the abstract submission and review process and finalizes and distributes the program. But it doesn't mention that the past president is also responsible for making sure the abstracts actually get published.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think again, is it essential, you know, for the bylaws? Is there something, if something comes up and the past president, you know, can't do that? If it's something that the executive director picks up, then we don't have to propose a bylaw change, you know, for that to happen. So that's where that stuff's moved to the policy manual. It doesn't mean that that they're not responsible for it, but it means that they're not legally held as per bylaws to doing this.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it really should be bylaw or policy.
Yeah.
I just thought just the fact that there's reference to overseeing abstract submission and review and
yeah,
and the
you know, you could
program,
have,
that could be policy too, rather than.
That's right. You could have one sentence in there actually. Past president shall chair the program committee that plans the annual conference in accordance with the policy manual.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop. That would do it. All except for in the event that the current president are not U.S. citizens, you know, some of those things.
So that's all I had. Thanks. This is amazing work.
It was
like
major.
Looks like Jenny O is next.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I put it in the chat and Penny answered it, and I'm fine to go with that if everyone else is good with it. Just the new executive director role. Penny suggests that perhaps that's not going to be a permanent position, but since we're talking about bylaws, I wonder if we need that written in some capacity. You know, if it's something about even at the discretion of the board, they can elect or, you know, bring in some sort of temporary or whatever position. Just to cover the executive director, I suppose.
Yeah, I think 5.10 is the board may hire one or more employees to conduct the day-to-day activities of the organization. Candidates for any paid position will be screened and approved by the board. And the board.
I missed that. Yep. Thanks, Deb. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, next is Jeff Laban.
Thank you all again. I want to echo my appreciation for the work that you all have done on this. Quick questions. First on section 3.1. Admittedly, I'm not well versed in how that sausage is made, but we say that membership requires obviously an interest, but also paying dues. I can imagine situations where hardship might lead someone to request you know, or not be able to pay dues, but we don't necessarily want to revoke their membership, you know, different things like that. So I just wonder, do we have the flexibility to make those decisions if this is written this way, or do we need to adjust that language at all?
And who pay membership dues shall be available to all who pay. I oftentimes try to break these sentences down into like where the simple part is and cut out the other stuff. And who pay membership dues.
Again, I just don't know if we need flexibility for making exceptions if people have hardships or other things like that.
Yeah, I'll let, I think, Mary and maybe Penny speak to that if there have been some situations with individuals who have not been able to or want to submit an abstract, but aren't a member, and whether we've had any situation like that come up.
We
Can
did
you
have a
jump
report
in?
from somebody from another country this year who legally couldn't come to the United States. You have to be a member of NASPSPA to submit an abstract, and they couldn't become a member because they were from a country that wouldn't allow them to become a member. And Mary can follow up because she worked with her office at her university to see if we had some way that we were able to help that person so that they could, you know, not pay the dues because they couldn't from their government. So we have had an instance where there was a concern about that.
Can I just jump in here? So if we are using Robert's rules, isn't there something that the voting members can choose to suspend the standing rules to make sort of case by case special exceptions when they feel it's necessary? So like in Penny's example, just throwing that out there.
It would have been illegal for us to do what they asked us to do. So based on legal advice, we were unable to help that individual. There are some cases where when we have a number of people that get awards that don't accept the money and roll that money back into the organization for student support. So we do provide some student support for if they apply for an opportunity to maybe get their membership or their conference fees paid. So we have done that in the past. Penny, I'm not so sure if we've allowed other members, because you know we've all been on this short term. Penny's the only person who's pretty much historically been a part of this organization for a really, really long time in meetings. Do we ever waive fees?
Yes. We currently waive fees for distinguished scholars who are retired. So if you are a distinguished scholar, you're retired, then you become a lifetime member, sort of. But typically, as far as I know, and remember, I'm just getting into dealing with the membership issues now. I always just dealt with the conference issues, but I don't recall that there's any other instance that we've waived membership fees. But we have some other secretary treasurers on the line here too, in case they may have an idea.
I would offer that clause to just be removed entirely. And in fact, the next sentence, those both seem to me to be things that would be better specified in policies to give the board flexibility in terms of meeting operational needs. You know, there's two different issues. One's like who's eligible, who are we trying to include, and the other one is what's the mechanism of subscription. Technically, if I paid for Penny's membership, would she not be eligible to be a member because she's not paying it? I mean, that's an extreme situation, but what if we started a scholarship fund where we wanted to pay for students?
And we do.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. I think students we've helped a lot. I do know also that there's some people and members that occasionally help somebody who might be in need that necessarily doesn't, like, it's not NASPSPA. So yeah, I think those are all good pieces of feedback for that.
And you might be able to say, and whose membership dues have been paid, you know, that
or waived.
Paid or well, if paid or waived. But you do have to have something about who the membership is and who the membership is available to.
Yeah.
There's a membership article.
You could change that language to just specify it's people who are current on their membership dues.
Yeah.
I think it's important to distinguish too that the help that has been given to students that we've been talking about here has, at least to my knowledge, has been for conference fees, which is separate from what we're talking about here as membership fees. So we don't want to confuse those because they're different.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think we've ever waived a membership fee for anyone. I don't know if we want to do that, open that can of worms.
Well, but the folks that Penny was referring to who are distinguished and retired, aren't we effectively doing that with them? Or was that just conference fees?
Well, you're right. Yeah.
I mean, again, I just I don't
Part of the award. It's
Yeah.
part of the award that you don't have to pay membership fee, but I think we want to definitely clean this one up a little bit.
The other question I had real quickly about 10.5, talking about the basically the political activities. So again, I can imagine there might be a scenario where we feel as though we want to send a letter to a legislative body expressing maybe support or the opposite generally is how that works, right? Or non-support for certain laws that may be passed. Again, I can think of some recent examples that have led us to not hold the conference in certain areas. Does that language kind of include those sorts of activities, or is that clearly a separate sort of activity that wouldn't be sort of covered there?
Yeah, what's in here is this is Internal Revenue Code requirements for nonprofits. Doesn't matter whether you're a nonprofit for local charity or Breast Cancer Society. If you're a 501c3 nonprofit, you have to abide by this code.
Okay, perfect.
If we choose not to have a conference in a particular state because of the kinds of things that they've passed that may actually make it less accessible for some of our membership or whatever reason, we don't have to send anything to Congress or the state legislature about that. We can just not go there.
Okay, good deal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
It seems to me that in the past, NASPA has thought about sending letters that talk about our stand relative to physical activity that would be intended to influence legislation. Is that
NASPA has?
Well, I know we've talked about it, when there have been, physical activity, laws related to physical activity, access or availability, or I mean, to be honest, I can't remember, Deb, but it seems to me that we've talked about going in with other physical activity organizations to express a point of view relative to legislation that would impact physical activity.
Yeah, I know that the NAK has talked about that.
Yeah. And they do that.
And they do that. This doesn't prohibit that kind of thing that I'm aware of. But I also know, at one point, I think it was back with NAK, there was some discussion about are we going to be like the ACSM with putting out statements and having maybe a committee that even is devoted to public policy. I don't know enough about the Internal Revenue Code that there's another, there's a 501 C3, and then there's another 501 that allows actually more political activity that I think is not tax exempt if you want to donate to it.
Well, the word substantial is probably critical from a legal perspective. I don't know how it's to be interpreted, but I would imagine that substantial has some legal, right? So like substantial probably means some percent of your effort or something is being put towards that. So us drafting a letter, if that were to come up, probably wouldn't violate this, I would guess.
But for sure, putting out a statement that we support a certain candidate, we can't do.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Absolutely not. You know, that can't be done.
Well, and the latter part of that, I'm totally, you know, where it talks, as soon as it mentions political campaigns, of course.
Yeah.
But it's that top part where it's talking about influencing legislation, which, but again, I think substantial probably covers us, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I do remember quite a while ago, in maybe the first draft of this, looking some things up about nonprofit organizations and what that means. And the big thing that they mentioned was just, yeah, political campaigns.
Thank you.
Sure. I think if it ever came up that do we want to do this, if the organization came up like at a business meeting, we would check in to see, and maybe check in with the lawyer. Can we do this? You know, or not, to get that kind of advice. That's what I would recommend.
So Mary, before we move on to the membership due pieces, we had two other comments from Travis Dorr. She had to leave the meeting, but this is just for us to think about. One, throughout the document, it does refer to NASPA as the association and then also as the society. So I would just be right there. And then the other one that he brings up is back on 3.3. He mentioned it seems odd that the board would suspend or expel a member and also overhear the appeal. And he suggested that we may want to have sort of a special group or a third party to do that, so you're not judge and jury.
Okay.
Those are all the questions that came up in the chat. So if there's not anything else, Mary, I think we're good to move on.
To the next one. All right, great. And thank you so much for the feedback. It's really helpful for us to hear the feedback. Our heads have been in it for a while, and getting some outside information is really helpful. We'll try to get this cleaned up and hopefully ready for the meeting on June 11th. The second piece of information that we wanted to share with you today and get your feedback on is membership fees. And basically, the membership fees haven't been changed since 2013, and that was really just designed to accommodate a journal cost, an increase in the journal. So we really haven't changed our fees for NASPA, bringing in more money to NASPA in quite some time. And certainly a few things happened, like a pandemic, that made us realize that we need to be kind of in front of making sure we have a reserve, an appropriate amount of money in reserve in case something goes a little south. So we made comparisons when we started working on this with other organizations in the field and trying to stay at least somewhat in line or come up with reasonable recommendations for a new fee structure. The reason for why we're doing this one is that there is rising costs. So we don't generate enough money right now to really pay for what we have a commitment to. We're adding more opportunities to engage with membership throughout the year, and the need for a contingency fund. You know, as all of you know, last year with the pandemic, we had a town hall meeting last summer, and thanks to your input, and I actually think it was just a lot of bravery on the behalf of all of us and members, we decided to pay $70,000 in a penalty fee and get out of a hotel because of the pandemic. And so we're not in New Orleans. And lo and behold, if we had stuck with the plan and said we're going to try to pull off the conference, we would be paying about $150,000 this coming month to a hotel, because we wouldn't be able to fill the block. There's no way. With Canada still has closed borders. We would have had a disaster. It would have been $150,000 and we would be belly up. We would not have the money to pull it off. We would be bankrupt. So we have to change our fee structures in order to really to bring in the funds that we need to in order to run our organization. We also added a lot with the whole pandemic. We decided there's many other things we could do. We had the teaching network, we had the research group that came in. We're starting to work on things like coaching and applied meetings for individuals. And so we're really thinking now a little bit beyond just offering a conference for our members. There's a lot more to what we would like to do. And I think that over this past year, we've seen some of the opportunities there. So right now, currently, NASPA has about $50,000 in an investment account. We have more money in our market account, but we haven't, all of our expenditures are not out. That we know that we have expenditures on. We have grants going out to students, and we also haven't paid an executive director because she won't let us pay her, but we have to pay our people and our personnel. So we have about $70,000 in reserve. And when we came up with the fee structure, we tried to really keep in mind students, postdocs, retirees, but this is what we are proposing, and then I'll give you just a little bit more information. So we're talking about phasing in a new fee structure over 3 years. We talked a lot about it with COVID. There are some people that took furloughs and hits, and we know that it's been a bit of a struggle financially for some people. So we wanted to phase in what we could do. So we're doing our typical 2021 fee structure is what we are applying right now. We would take it to 150, the 175, and to 200 for full professionals. For students, we did talk with our Mike, and really wanted to make sure, vetted that out, and he didn't seem to think that it was unreasonable what we were requesting in terms of students. We tried really hard to come up with something that would not be overwhelming for membership over the 3-year period, but that we could generate more revenue for the group. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea, current fees right now, and this is a ballpark figure, this is not an accurate, an exact number. So what we did was we just split the number of, we generally have about half and half students and professional members, along with our other groups. So we just estimated half and half, and this is a little off. I think right now we're bringing in just a little bit more than $31,000. But if we were to put in this approach of phasing in, we would generate 50,000 in the first year, 58 in the second year, and 75,000. That doesn't mean that's cleared money. That means that for what it costs us to run our organization, which is, we've been on average for the last 5 years, we're at about $30,000 to $40,000 a year running our shop. Okay. But the key thing here is that we haven't added in the new executive director salary, and we know that we have a little bit more expense, and so we're going to be spending somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 a year of expenditures. So we need to at least get to a point where we can generate enough revenue that we can put money in the bank so that we can build our resources and our reserves so that we have something to fall back on. And Penny and I are already a little nervous. We're really excited about Hawaii, and I would like to be there right now. And we hope in a year we will be there, but we don't really know what's coming. And so we really do feel like we need to have a reserve. We've gone back and forth on this. There was one point we talked about, well, maybe do we really need to add that third tier? But if we want to build reserves, we're pretty much going to have to go there, I think, on the third tier. But that's kind of in a nutshell where we are as an organization. At the business meeting, Laura will have all the exact numbers and everything up there for you to see. We'll have a much better, I think, a better representation for you guys to be able to see where our money is. But we're not going to be bringing in enough money under the fee structure that we have right now. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions and see if anybody has any feedback for us.
Diane St. Marie, you're up first.
Hi there. Maybe I'll give my thanks for the bylaws and all the work done with that. And I can see you guys were working hard on this. I remember Jody Jensen, when she was president, was also kind of concerned with the budget and thought about how to raise our fees. So I agree, and I like the phasing. One of the things that strikes me, though, when I looked at that chart was the retirees and the postdocs are pretty much doing the same contribution. And I have a concern there because I think postdocs are coming in pretty broke for the most part. There are some paid postdoc positions, but even those, at least from a Canadian perspective, I mean, you know, you're lucky if you're getting 30,000 to 40,000 as a postdoc. So my feeling is I think retirees could kick in more. Like I just don't see them as being the same. In fact, in 2021, postdocs are paying more than retirees. So, you know, as a prof, if you're moving into retiree, maybe do your budgeting. But that's my initial kind of concern when I look at this. And I think it should be switched. Retirees should maybe be paying more than postdocs, who should be more equivalent to students.
And I will say that postdocs and retirees are a very small number of people. And so, you know, I don't think that's going to change the bottom line too much if we modify those two. It's the students and the professionals that's where almost everybody falls into. So we can definitely take that into consideration, Diane.
That's a good point.
We did talk about it. We do realize it's hard for postdocs right now.
And we had a couple comments from JD DeFries and Harjeev, both agreeing that the phasing is a good idea. Is there anything else either of you want to add to that? None? Oh, go ahead.
I was wondering if Penny could give us some idea of what's the cost of a conference. No, I remember in the past the registration fees. Oh no, these are membership fees, and then there's a registration fee. So sorry.
You want me to talk about
that? Is a good question. The conference fees pay for the conferences, so whatever we make, we put it into the conference because it goes back to the members. But the membership fee, it's a little bit different animal.
And essentially the goal of the conference fees is to kind of break even. That's kind of been the philosophy. Occasionally we've made some money, like in Montreal, an extra 100 people showed up. Okay, so we made money and it was in Canadian funds, so we did very well with the exchange rate. But then San Diego, we decided that it was okay to lose money because we wanted to put some extra funding into the 50th anniversary. So, but kind of the philosophy is the conference just kind of pays for itself. But sometimes, depending on who shows up, we could make money or we could lose money, like in Baltimore. Not enough people showed up. But philosophically, it's kind of supposed to be even.
Any other questions for us? So other than maybe reevaluating the postdocs, we might be in the ballpark.
We did have another comment from Cheryl about aligning the postdocs with the student fees. So it's not too dissimilar from Diane. And then Adam King, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a kind of question or suggestion. Yeah, a lot of work goes into this, and appreciate kind of the thought process of how we can raise some funds on that. One, I wonder, is there any consideration that this increase in costs might be prohibitive and maybe take some membership numbers away from us with these increases that are coming? The cost comes back onto us individuals in a fair bit over this increase as professionals, but we might need to consider, is this going to maybe drive some membership numbers away from there with that cost? Hopefully not, but my other kind of suggestion with that is there is a lot of passion and commitment to NASPA, and I'm wondering, as we phase this in, would it be possible to add like a donation on top of our membership when we do our renewals, that we have this membership fee and some individuals may be willing to provide an additional donation that might go above and beyond what our membership fees are, and that could be a revenue source that people could make to help kind of offset or increase the reserves that we're looking for, and also kind of phase in some of the membership increases as we're going forward.
I'd like to make one comment. Thank you, Adam, for your first comment that you made. Our membership kind of goes up and down with the conference. Because we have the rule, you have to be a member to submit an abstract. When we have big conferences, we have high membership, and when we have low conferences, we have low membership. So some people only pay their dues if they're going to the conference. And so that's not the majority of our membership, but it is quite a chunk. So some people choose not to pay if they're not going to submit an abstract. Okay? So membership is not as stable. And in some organizations, if you don't pay your dues every year and then you want to come back, they make you pay in arrears. Okay? So if you didn't pay for 2 years, now you have to pay back 2 years, and then the next year. We don't do that, but it does ebb and flow with conference participation.
Yeah, I think the teaching network and the seminar series, time will tell kind of if that helps increase some of our membership numbers. I think those are strong components and could help draw people in, which would be helpful for that. But yeah, the conference part of that is
right. And I think that's a good point, Adam. Our goal is that by having more deliverables, it's not that we're just asking for you to give us more money. We're going to give you more service, more opportunities to get engaged and provide more, just more services. So I think that and we've done this past year, and we feel like we're starting to get that under our belt, and I think we can expand out more and more. So hopefully we really become more than just a meeting.
Penny or Mary, did either one of you want to comment on Adam's suggestion of the donation piece?
Didn't we do that last year, Penny, that you could donate more? You could pay more. Oh, no, that was a conference fee, not membership fee.
Yeah, we did it on conference fee, but I think that's an excellent suggestion.
So, yeah, we're on that. We're going to do that. That's a really good idea.
Thank you, Adam, for that.
Yes.
Could I add a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
I think that this year, I think Adam just alluded to it, but I think that you have to ask yourself, what are you getting for your whatever it is? And that's where the conference is always tied in. And I think this year you began to build on things that you got for your membership that were not the conference. So people who are not going to the conference say, you know, why should I do this? Well, a commitment to the organization is a nice thing, but when you have to decide whether to pay your groceries or a commitment to your organization, you know, it's a pretty easy choice. So I think the society needs to do more things that are worth belonging year round, whether you go to a conference or not. So I think and I think you've already started on that, but I think we need to build on that. That's just my comment. So I'm seconding Adam's point about, you know, the colloquia and the different things that have been organized as forums have been great. And I think that needs to continue because you get that for free if you're a member.
Right. And, you know, COVID forced us into doing some things differently, and we realized we could do so many more things. So yes, I think we're all over that now. So
right. And I also would like to just make a point that retirees who are academics are in a much better position to pay more than a postdoc who's starting their career with student loan debt. So I definitely think there should be a separation between retirees, and I think the donations is another thing. But, you know, I know it's a small group, but just it's a statement that, you know, they can pay more.
Let's go back to Diane.
Yeah, great. The other thing I was going to mention, which got hinted on, and I would encourage the board to keep thinking about, is I do think we can leverage our expertise to have events that occur where people from applied fields pay money to move in. For example, we're doing some work with physiotherapists, and we learned that it's nothing for them to have to pay $350 for a 4-hour workshop, and they'll put the money in for that. So maybe, you know, starting to think a little bit about other ways to bring monies in. And, you know, if that starts, maybe in 2024, we stay at 175 or whatever, if we start to find these other revenue streams. So maybe part of my suggestion is not anchoring these numbers down as they are now, maybe more the principle of a phasing in of increased fee structures. But, you know, perhaps we will maintain membership and we will maybe have some other revenue sources that begin that don't go to the exact numbers that are described here. So maybe the principle of phasing in for larger fee structures might be a worthwhile thing to think about.
I don't know, we'll have to check our bylaws, but I think that the membership has to vote for the specific things that we propose, but we will look into that. You know, we could do 2 years and then bring it back to membership for that 3rd year vote. Penny and I talked a little bit about that yesterday. And then I think you're right, Diane. One of the things, you know, this past year, although we didn't get it off the ground, but we had worked on it. We had planned on having a post-conference coaching kind of clinic thing where we would be using some of our experts, but bringing in practitioners. And we saw that Canada probably had a better opportunity for us to do that than maybe even in the United States. And then we started to work on that for this summer, and we just haven't been able to get it off the ground because there's been a lot of things spinning with the pandemic. But those kinds of things we are seeing as opportunities. And you're right, they could generate the revenue that we're looking for that, maybe that 3rd tier, so that we could avoid that. But, you know, we work on sponsorship. It never is consistent. We never really have the sponsorship that we say we can do it, but then we try. So there's some things that we've been working on, but there's a few things that we just haven't really seen change yet. So yeah, I think all the feedback so far has been real helpful I know for me. I'm sure it's for the rest of the soon-to-be board if we vote on the bylaw changes.
We've had a number of folks in the comments providing support for the separation between the postdocs and retirees piece. So thank you all.
Yes, I think that's a done deal. I think we can easily do that.
And I have negative comments about the professional fees.
None in there. There any comments? So Jenny and I had a point about the retiree piece that we can get to, and then Quincy had a question about the membership piece. But are there any issues with the full professional that Penny had just asked for? Okay. Jenny, did you want to express anything beyond what's in the comment?
No, that's okay. I mean, geez, if Jody and the other retirees say it's no big deal, then we've got that to look forward to, right, Chris?
I think so. Quincy asked if the pay 3 years in advance option is still there, and how would that be sort of integrated within this fee structure?
I hadn't thought about that. We don't have that proposal yet, but we will when business meeting comes. Thank you for that. That's something we need to address.
I think at one point with the board, when we were kicking around all these things, one thing that we had talked about was the potential of, if you're willing to pay 3 years in advance, you sort of get a little bit of a discount. So you sort of get in on this year's piece,
we'll work
right?
up something like that that's similar to the one before. Thank you for that suggestion.
And Mary and Chris, I didn't necessarily mean it as for the discount, but at the same time, as many of us are committed to the organization, I think a lot of us are willing to do the 3 years.
That's a wonderful thing. I just spaced it. So we'll definitely have a proposal for that when we come to the business meeting.
Sounds good.
Jane, do you want to chime back in about scaled cost structure?
So I wondered if we have ever thought about so that we're the North American Society, but as you know, especially since we've all started Zooming, that a lot of our conferences are available to people in other countries. And I wondered if we had thought about a different pay structure. I just looked at the Society for Research and Child Development, SRCD, which has a 1-year membership of $210. but it also has a category called LMIC, low and middle income countries member. And it's really like $5 versus $200. So I wondered if we'd ever thought about that, or do we ever have that inquiry from other countries? Are some of our graduate students, I know when I was in Botswana a couple of years ago, a student of Jerry Gallagher's was at the University of Botswana. You know, he's not going to join NASPA once we start doing virtual things. So I'm kind of hoping we'll always have a conference on the ground, but stream the conference as well for people who can't make it to the conference for whatever reason or can look at it later. So I hope this has changed our way of thinking about conferencing and getting together, although I still miss my beers with you guys. But I think the point is that we should think about that as a category. I've never thought about that. And I actually belong to the International Motor Development Research Consortium, and we've never thought about that either. And we have a lot of people that are coming in from other countries. So just a thought.
Thanks, Jane. I think that's something we should think about for sure. And the streaming, yeah. You got to figure.
And I certainly agree too. I mean, that's what a lot of the open access journals do, is it scales based on your country. And so it's good to see that that's going across publishing and conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll have a conversation about that before the business meeting.
I think, unless I missed something in the comments, I think we're caught up. If not, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
I believe we've covered your questions. Thank you all so much for your help on this. It really helps to do this before the meeting so that we aren't bogged down with lots of questions and then not being able to handle it. And then having to come back a year later because of our bylaws, so we have to have approval in business meetings. So this has been really, really helpful for us. We're going to pull together our team. We're going to the EC until we become the board. And then we'll see you guys at the business meeting, hopefully, on June 11th. So thank you so much and have a great day. This recording will be posted if you know people that want to listen to it, kind of catch up.